What you are about to hear might just keep you up tonight. Welcome to Hauntcore Vault. I am the storyteller, and I'll help you fall asleep. If you are new, please subscribe to the channel. Let's dive in the vault.
Was driving home with my family after visiting my sister who lives a town over. I was learning how to drive, had a pretty good handle on it, and my stepdad let me drive there to get used to winter highway driving, so naturally I drove back as well. The storm wasn't supposed to start until later that evening, so we thought it would be fine. It started snowing when we left, which wasn't terrible because I was capable of driving in the snow. But it picked up fast. We had just left town and were maybe 10 minutes into the drive before it became a complete whiteout. I'm driving in the left lane, it's 8 p.m., middle of January, so it's pitch black in peak winter where I live. Not to mention, these are Canadian highways. The only lights you're getting for a long stretch are going to be your headlights. I was doing my absolute best not to panic and was shocked at the level of calm I was able to muster. My stepdad was doing his best to guide me and try to find a safe place to pull over. But the winds were blowing snow everywhere, so we couldn't see the ditches or the lines. I had two worries. One, I'm in the left lane, so if I pull over, I might not know how far exactly to go and might throw us into a ditch that's completely filled with snow. Two, I can't see the lines at all, and if I keep driving, I might not stay in the correct lane because of that. The only thing I could do was to keep driving until I was absolutely safe to pull over. I was using the rumble strips as my only guide, since the tires were able to get a slight feel for them. Driving 30 km/h in a 90 zone. My stepdad is guiding me to the road his parents live on so we can have a better place to stop. We passed maybe 8 cars in the ditch between my sister's town and my grandparents' road. At some point, the road was completely covered and the rumble strips weren't noticeable anymore either, so I was just going off instinct. I ended up hitting a sheet of ice at an awkward angle and spun out into the oncoming lane. Got control of the car, saw faint headlights and said, "Yup, wrong lane, shouldn't be here at all," and quickly but safely moved us back into the proper lane. My mom's in the back seat freaking the fuck out because we just spun out. My stepdad is surprisingly less chill than me, but trying to keep his cool, doing everything he can to not grab the wheel in a panic. I can barely see an inch from the front of the car. Finally managed to get to his parents' road and pull over. We got out to switch places, and when I stepped out of the vehicle, the snow was up to my shins. Ended up staying the night at my grandparents' house because there was no way in hell we were making it back home alive if we tried. Found out about 15 minutes after getting in that they closed off the highways to poor conditions. We had to dig our way out of the house the next morning to go home. I got to stay home from school that day since I was stuck out of town. Meanwhile, everyone else had to go in, lol. It was my first winter with my learners and my first blizzard drive. If we had a smaller car, we never would have made it to my grandparents to begin with. I was terrified, but I was not going to let my parents know that, especially with my mom in the back seat scared. I never should have driven that night, but it helped me learn how to handle those kinds of drives later on, and I became a better driver because of it. It was a fucking trip, though, that's for sure. I'll never forget it.
I know. I wasn't hurt or lost anything. My first thought was Hurricane Katrina. In Austin, we didn't get weather, but we got a lot of refugees, evacuees, at the convention center. Since I was unemployed at the time, I volunteered. I had never helped with disaster recovery, so while it was weird and chaotic to me, I suppose experienced people probably have seen the like before. Coordinators were making things up as we went along. There were several web apps stood up, not our efforts, nationwide, to try to register people who had evacuated and to find people who had evacuated, so we suggested that people enter their info into several of them. I remember when a manager said that the governor was doing a photo op upstairs and they were looking for staffers to be in the pictures or video. People eye-rolled because they didn't want to stop doing actual useful work. Unfortunately, after a few days, I got sick with something and had to recover at home. So even though I didn't actually get hit by Katrina, it was memorable for me. I went through 2 recent Central Texas ice storms, but both were not threatening in the end, but tediously inconvenient. Burst pipe in the first one on 17 February 2021. I was very lucky to get a plumber in only 7 days. But in the interim, I was carrying buckets of water from a neighbor's outdoor tap. And there was a city boil order, so I had a lot of pots on the stove. In another one, 1 February 2023, I was out of power for days. But oddly, I don't think the temperature dropped below 50 in my place though, not even in the unheated garage. I was wearing lots of clothes though, including a medieval lyra pipe.
July 2021. I was at my now fiance's house, and we knew there was a storm coming in. We were in a decently high risk level. We'd gone outside to take pictures of the clouds and watch the sky as things rolled in, and eventually sat down on the porch as the rest of it rolled in. The clouds were this shade of blue we dubbed Miku blue because it looks like Miko Histano, or however you spell her name. It was a very eerie color, and I knew it was light refracting through hail in the storm. But the moment I won't forget is when the wind went from quiet to just slowly increasing to a roar. It wasn't even that slow, but it wasn't a snap-your-fingers change either. It just picked up and kept picking up until it sounded like a train about to hit, and I told my fiancé we should probably go inside because that was the exact sound we'd heard that accompanies a tornado. So we did, and found out the power was out. My fiancé was videoing the backyard when we went in, where trees were whipping around like crazy and the rain was pounding the windows, and we confirmed later hail had hit the house. Rewatching, there's a point where leaves and I think cardboard pieces, for some reason if memory serves right, is up 3-ish stories in the air and swirling around just outside the window. I'm pretty sure we actually caught the funnel, or whatever, on video too. There's a specific part of the video you can see trees almost bending in half and a major change in intensity that tracks through the backyard. We then gathered all the animals and everyone and went down to the basement to wait it out. I was a little freaked because the power being out meant my shitty phone plan lost data and I couldn't see radar, so I was without any information on where and what the storm was doing. Once it died down, we all went back upstairs and outside and looked around. The front yard had a trash can knocked down and blown around, and leaves and branches were strewn all around. A plastic lawn chair had gotten tossed. The backyard, well, the most obvious thing was a giant oak tree had been uprooted and fallen. It was pointing to the west with our backs to the house. Relative to the house, I don't know if it was to the actual west. Just to the right of it, a tree was twisted and partially wrapped around another tree at a 90-degree angle to that one that had fallen. And there were a few other trees in other directions, like they had been pulled around like a funnel had come through. We could see the path in the trees where whatever had come through had gone because of the missing tree branches and stuff. The news isn't going to be able to confirm or deny if it was a funnel, I don't think. They did confirm, though, that they couldn't discern a tornado path, but a wind event with wind speeds equivalent to an EF1 tornado did occur. I think it was a funnel that couldn't quite form back up, as the cell that hit us had produced 2 tornadoes earlier in the day, up further north in the state. Anyways, that was an insanely cool and scary storm, and I'm just glad it didn't hit worse. It was bad enough as it was.
There was a really bad ice storm when I was a teenager. Schools were closed, obviously, but I had been feeding a family friend's cat while she was on vacation. She lived about a 10-minute walk away. The morning after the storm, I set out to feed the cat, and it took me about 45 minutes each way, just from the ice. I attached ice spikes to my boots, so it wasn't the slipperiness that was the problem, it was the trees. Most of the route passed huge trees, and it was impossible to walk under them. The storm had already taken out a lot of them, but huge chunks of tree were still coming down. Before going under any of them, I had to stop and listen for any sound of cracking, because it meant that a huge tree limb could come down on my head any second. There were branches and limbs so big I had to squeeze my way around them.
I passed one small street, and it looked like someone had chopped up a forest and dumped it on the road. It was completely covered. All I could hear was ice cracking, trees cracking, and the occasional deafening thud of half a tree coming off. It was so eerie, but I liked it in a way. It was probably the most interesting walk I'd ever taken through my neighborhood.
May 31, 2013. The most stressful night of my life. The night of the El Reno tornado. I wasn't chasing, but rather at home in Norman. As soon as I saw the storm start moving south, an extremely unusual path, I packed a go bag and went to the National Weather Center. The atmosphere was light, and someone joked that their friend needed to move before they get hit by the tornado. A few minutes later, we all went silent as pictures of the Weather Channel truck hit Twitter after the tornado tossed it. We were speechless and stood on the roof watching the bright blue sky of transformers exploding in south. As the storm moved into Norman, a few of us looked for a new place to watch the storm after security kicked us off the roof and settled on an office overlooking the parking lot. Within a matter of minutes, cars started streaming in and filling the parking lot, with more parking haphazardly in the lanes. People tried to come in the closest door, but we pointed them down to the main entrance. Federal building, security is serious. The last people to come to the door were a couple, with the woman heavily pregnant. I let them in rather than forcing them to walk any further through the window and rain. Eventually, the worst of the storm passed, and we were told it was safe to leave. My drive out of the weather center was the single physically darkest moment of my life. Even with my car's headlights, I swear I couldn't see the road in front of me. I barely made it past the basketball stadium when I heard the sharp crack of hail hitting my windshield. I ducked into a Sonic, and the employee let me and another driver into the kitchen for safety. After the second round of hail ended, I was able to make it home. The tropical typhoon Ondoy in the Philippines. I was a child back then, and my family was still young and new in the area when the storm hit. The floodwaters came so quick, we had little time to get some furnishings up. I remember seeing cockroaches, rats, and centipedes crawling out the sewers and into the walls. Toads from the vacant spot near our house was swimming around outside. If you tried to go outside and swim, it's more than 6 feet deep. Thankfully didn't have a raging river, but you'll be swimming with a lot of debris and snakes. My mom was even planning to knock off our air conditioner just in case the floodwater rises again, because we won't be able to swim out downstairs if the water rises again. My parents did a good job in making sure I was calm. When a quarter of our staircase has been submerged, I remember me and my dad making paper boats and having a competition to see whose paper boat can drift and last longer in the water. One of our neighbors, who was a volunteer rescue back then, had told us the story of him passing by with his small raft in this small house. He saw bubbles rising out from somewhere. Since he already had passengers he didn't think much of it, until after the waters has gone, he discovered a body of a man in a window, arms dangling out the bars, like he had been trying to claw his way out. It's common in our country to have bars welded in the windows and to have doors a metal gate to prevent thieves from breaking in.